Why redesign the Pokemon trading card game? I'm Keith, a board game designer, and recently, with the release of Pokemon TCG Pocket, which changed a bunch of the fundamental parts of the game, I was really curious to go in and have a look, get some ideas as to why they made some changes. Is it specifically for the app, or is it trying to make the game cater to a more casual experience? I've created a nice graph and let's talk about it. There's a couple of major differences between the two games. I've been playing the trading card game quite a lot recently. I've been enjoying it quite a bit as just like building my own skills, learning a new game, playing it kind of competitively to get an idea of what makes the Pokemon TCG kind of the like one remaining good competitive card games. But with the release of Pocket, an entirely different design mindset seems to have appeared, and I'm curious to kind of go through it. So let's start with the one thing I forgot to include on this list, which is deck size. A lot of different formats in games are determined by the number of cards played in them. For example, Magic the Gathering has a 40, 60, 100, where 60 is the really competitive, 40 is pre-release, and then 100 is Commander. Pokemon has something similar with the 40 for pre-release and then 60 for standard. And then I've been working on the Masters Challenge format, which is trying to be the 100. Pokemon Pocket is 20. So it is trying to lean more towards that Marvel Snap, which is 12, and trying to have less variance and more specific card issues. But there is some core problems with that. There's a lot less searching in the game. It's pretty much just Pokeball, which finds a basic. It doesn't actually help you evolve your Pokemon, which is kind of a key part of it. And if you're playing, also you only get 2 copies of each card instead of 4, like normally. So if you have an evolutionary line of up to a stage 2 with 2 copies of each, that is 6 cards, which is only a small percentage of your 20 card deck. And when you can't really search for them, finding them can be a little bit awkward. So that's kind of the starting change that I think set a lot of the tone for some of these things. But let's have a look at the graph and let's go through. So first one is bench size. Bench size kind of makes sense in the Pokemon trading card game. The maths makes sense for the classic. You have 6 Pokemon in your party, as via the video games and stuff. Has kind of always followed that same number. We have your 1 in the active, and you have your 5 kind of on your belt, ready to replace it. Pocket has only 3 on the bench, which means you would have 4 in total in play. And I think that kind of works nicely for how many Pokemon you really are playing in your deck. A lot of the decks that I have been building have been playing exactly 4 basics. So I'm never like holding something going like, man, I wish I had bench space for this. But in the Pokemon trading card game, you have a ton of cards that just sit there on the bench, fulfilling a supporting role in like drawing new cards or something like that. Like we have like Pidgeot EX, we have Bibarel, we have Fezandipiti, and we have stuff like Dust Noir. Like a lot of these utility Pokemon that don't really want to be in the active. You want your attacker in the active, and you have your support Pokemon on the bench doing stuff. And having space for those gives you more strategic depth and complexity. Whereas Pokemon Pocket really only has attackers. There's maybe 5 true support Pokemon. There's like Pidgeot, Butterfree. I would say Greninja counts as well. And some stuff like that, which just has an ability that you can use on the bench that kind of interacts with the game in a way. But it's sparse. It's not super common. So I understand having less space for it. But that is an understandable. I think that is a change more for the mobile medium rather than specifically the gameplay, because you can just have a ton of space. There's no reason why you can't. But next thing, supporter going first, and then attack going first. So one of the main ways that the Pokemon trading card game balances going first and second is that if you are going first, you cannot play a supporter, you cannot attack. And this prevents you from winning the game before your opponent has a chance to set up. Pokemon Pocket does not have this. You can both play a supporter and you can attack going first, but you don't generate an energy on your first turn, so in theory you shouldn't be able to attack. Except there is a card called Misty, which can generate potentially infinite energy if you're made of luck, and you just win the game on the first turn because you just attack, because you can attack going first. Both of these things, I think it's really strange to have included that. Not giving you an energy on the first turn, and then not having any Pokemon that don't require an energy to do it, like a utility attack. Like there's a Caterpie that just searches your deck for a grass type Pokemon that could have had no energy cost to do this attack, and then it makes sense if you're going first to do that and then get that attack off, draw the card basically. And you obviously can't win the game in that state. However, having something like Articuno do 80 damage to your unevolved active Pokemon and winning the game immediately seems like an oversight. That seems like a strange choice. In the Pokemon TCG, supporters not happening on the first turn meant that your opponent would take their mulligan, they would set up like, here's my guy, and then you can't instantly disrupt their entire hand. Like we have stuff like Iona right now, which gets rid of the entire hand. Zerosic, which would make you discard 2 cards, 3 cards. And a whole bunch like Airy, like you can't just rip your opponent's hand apart with these supporters before they have a chance to set up and play things. And you can't just attack and kill your opponent's small thing. Like we have Poison, where you can poison your opponent on an ability with Brute Bonnet, and then if you have stuff like Hisuian, Sneasel, and Perilous Jungle, maybe it takes enough damage in poison to die in the first turn. If they have no backup, they would lose. This is incredibly rare and really easy to outplay it by, when you set up, playing more Pokemon to your bench, right? However, there could be the ability to attack going first, like you could use something like Radiant Greninja, Moonlight Shuriken in 2 targets, that's 90 in 2 places, and that could wipe out someone's entire bench pretty easily if they're able to set that up. So I think the no attack going first, the no supporter going first makes sense. Both players have an opportunity to set up their bench and play stuff like Pokeball, search out for the Pokemon they actually need to put on the bench to set up and not lose immediately. So that is a strange choice that doesn't feel like a choice that they've made for being able to adjust the game to a more casual audience. It feels like they were like they won't be able to attack because then we're not giving them an energy to generate. And then Misty has become an oversight where that's broken that idea. Like 2 different people have gone, here is Misty, a powerful card because we need energy acceleration because everything costs 3 blue. And also, you shouldn't be able to attack on the first turn, but we're not giving you the ability. You can do it, but you just can't afford it, so it's not going to happen. And then somehow these overlapped in a strange way. So it's not to say that problem cannot be fixed with changing this one card, but it's interesting to see that they changed the rules and then they could do things that use it to its advantage, rather than right now where it's being abused to a disadvantage. You could have stuff like the Canopy, which lets you search out cards, or having attacks that just kind of let you set up. Like in the Pokemon trading card game, we have Cleffa, which attacks and you draw cards until you have 7. You could have stuff like that where it doesn't actually cost an energy and it does things to help you set up and rewards you for going first, which I think is interesting. Next is the energy system. The energy system is like a classic card game problem. Magic the Gathering struggles a lot with this because you can't do anything if you don't have land. In the Pokemon game, you just can't attack. You can still do other stuff without energy. And in Standard, we have right now Earthen Vessel, which has done a lot to make it easier to find and play energy, which I think is a good thing. And so you'll see that the energy counts of a lot of decks are kind of low. We're seeing them somewhere between 8 and 11, depending on the number of colors. So like Charizard deck, Responding to Fire is only 8. The Ancient Box deck, which the one that just plays Darkness Energy, is usually kind of 8. But then you see stuff like Raging Bolt plays 11 because they need 3 different colors. And that means that you can potentially search out the ones that you need. You're playing more around how you're attaching and using stuff. The energy pool system randomly generates a color from a list that you've determined upon building the deck. So you could potentially generate energy you're not using a color for, but it will kind of default to the ones that just match the Pokemon types that you have. So it might mean that you might generate an energy for something that you don't actually have an attack costed for. Like if I put a fire Pokemon in the deck, but like we have Terra at the moment in the TCG, if I put a fire Pokemon in the deck, there's a Terra Pokemon that attacks using grass energy. I think that exists. I can't attack with that on that default unless if it's adjusted for that. So there is a little bit of tinkering to build it, but it doesn't go like here's 1 2 1 2 1 2. It's kind of random as to how you get it. It's a bit weird to get used to, but you never don't have it. You will always have one per turn. You can always math out having one per turn. You can get extras with stuff like Misty and Gardevoir. I think that's it for extra. And so I can imagine there being more energy acceleration in the future. But it doesn't take up slots in your deck. So when they've gone, we need to go from 60 cards in the deck to 20 cards in the deck, they go, well, we can cut out 10 of them just by having a new energy system. And that I understand. That I think makes more sense for Pocket. But from a design sense, it being random kind of punishes you for playing multicolor because you don't have any special energy that fix colors. Like we have luminous energy, for example, which can make any color. You don't have that, and it's also randomized. So I was building a deck which was Venusaur Greninja, and so rather than having water energy so I could attack with Greninja and do the 60, I really only wanted him in the deck for the ability, and just maybe have the option for doing that attack. I would rather have a deck that has only grass energy so that I can guarantee that I get the double green to attack with my Venusaur EX. And it's a little clunky like that. Like I'm always going to want to mitigate that risk of not getting what I need to be able to attack. So it's simplified. I don't know that it's better. I don't know that it's being taken advantage of. It's just simplified, which I think is fine. I think for people that aren't TCG players and they're excited to come and play Pocket, that's better. That's like the easy on-road system to use. And stuff like Hearthstone and like other similar games like that, which are digital only, do use it quite well, and it's not a big deal. Like the mana crystal system that they have is pretty straightforward. You go, oh, I have this many, I can spend this many to do this much. Pokemon's the same. I need to allocate them so that I can pay for the cost to do the attack, which is kind of easy to understand, I think. So I kind of get that. Then let's go to our next bit, which is scoring. So this is one of the gripes that I do have with the Pokemon trading card game. The way that Standard is built, it encourages you to play a long list of single cards. Like, oh, I'm going to play one Lost Vacuum, or I'm going to play one of this card that deals with this scenario, because there's no sideboards. You go into Game 2 and Game 3 playing the exact same 60 cards. You can't change things to suit the matchup. So you're then forced to playing some utility cards for bad matchups to kind of guarantee what's going on. The kind of good example right now is Regidrago V-Star plays one Jamming Tower, one Temple of Sinnoh. Temple of Sinnoh is just to help the Lugia matchup, so any other matchup it's kind of useless. And Jamming Tower is for Gardevoir to kill things that are being kept alive only by Bravery Charm, basically, and like maybe shut down Forest Sealstone. That's kind of it, right? And so those are sideboard cards that are in the main deck because there's no sideboard. Like if you weren't playing against that matchup and you had the choice to add it or not have it, right, you would pick something that's going to be better generally and then sideboard in. And the price system can punish that a lot by saying, oh, this thing that you needed for this matchup, you're in this matchup, guess where that card is? It's inaccessible to you unless if you start winning the game. And you're like, well, I'm struggling to win the game because this randomized pool of cards has been removed from me. And you see really punishing examples of this all the time, but I've played decks that, like for example, Regidrago V-Star, which is like 6 grass, 3 fire energy, and searching your deck and finding all 3 fire energy primes, you go, okay, GG, next game. You just lose immediately because there's no way to interact with that zone beyond removing basic Pokemon currently, which is really punishing. I've seen stuff like 4 Curly is prized on the there was a Japanese live footage game on one of their big events, Guy playing God of War has 4 Curlier prized. It's not playing Rare Candy. It's like, this is the main Troy engine in the entire deck. And you're like, I just lose for free. We loaded up the game. I drew my initial 7, which I don't have any choice in that either. It's not a mulligan method. You just get your starting hand. And you go, okay, I remove these 6 cards, and I've lost the game. I've not interacted in any way. They're just the key cards that I can only play 4 of, which is less than 6, that I need, have been removed from my deck. I instantly lose. And it's like a really feels bad variance thing. And the goal of designing a game like this is to remove things that put you in a scenario where you've lost because of something not in your control. Like when you're playing against another player, if they've put you in a scenario where it's an unwinnable situation, you want it because that player that you're playing against made good choices. They did something that you didn't prepare for. Your deck is not matched up well against, and then that's how you lose. Instead of just the way that the game is built, you can't do anything and then you lose. That seems like a grinding and frustration point for a player, especially a new player and a casual player. And so if they're trying to adjust the game for a casual market and they go, well, we're down to 20 cards, do we really want to remove 6 of them, or in Pocket's case 3 points is what they've moved it down to? Do you really want to remove 3 of them, which is again more than the maximum number of copies of the card that you can have, to have to deal with that variance? Is that going to be a fun and balanced way to do things? And I agree with removing that system and putting in KO points, because it's basically what it is. But the reward usually in the TCG is you get cards in your hand, and I kind of understand that. I like doing that. You can just have me draw from the deck though. You could just have me arbitrarily earn points. So I don't know. I do think it's interesting, and I do think it's very punishing. The game hasn't established good ways to mitigate horrible circumstances from this feature, and I think that they could just have ever-present cards in the standard rotation. Like a Gladion is a really good supporter, which just lets you get any card, and like that would be fine. Like if we just always had a Gladion type effect, then it wouldn't be so bad. Because like this one thing that I need, like your ace spec, which is the one of in your deck that's fucking always in the prizes, then being able to go and get that thing right when you need it is going to be very helpful. And so Pocket mitigating some of its problem, I think, is a good idea and skews more towards a casual audience. And I think that is a more intentional choice made to adjust the game and remove a grinding point to make it an easier entry to a casual audience, which I understand. And then the next one I think is interesting. I think is a little bit more telling. In the way that you set up in the Pokemon trading card game is you flip a coin and you get your opponent to choose heads or tails. If they correctly call the flip, they get to choose if they go first or second. Now, some decks will want to go first and some decks will want to go second. If you and your opponent both want a different option, then that's fine. It will usually work out that you'll get the one that you want. It's not a big deal. Sometimes you'll get advantage from picking something different, and it's kind of a big strategic choice because, again, they have this supporter and attack going first thing that you can't do if you're going first. But you can evolve your stuff sooner. And I think that's the important distinction. So being able to choose, do I need to evolve stuff? Can I just be setting up and attacking as quick as I can? That's going to determine whether I'm going first or going second. In Pokemon Pocket, it's just assigned to you. You're just given first or second, the game flips a coin, and then one player's heads, one player's tails automatically. Which I think is interesting. Because in the Pokemon TCG, I understand there's a lot of strategy between which one you want, and you can lean into it or you can be agnostic to it and live a more balanced lifestyle or whatever. That's fine. In Pokemon Pocket, some of that same stuff exists. There's a Mankey deck that just kind of came out with the new Mankey promo where you pretty much always want to be going second, so you can attach your fighting energy and attack for 30 immediately. That's like the first thing you want to do. And then when it comes back to your next turn, you're evolving, you're attaching the second energy, and then you're attacking again. You want to do this every game. You would never choose to go first, given the option. Now, every time that you are given first is a bad is a bad scenario for you. And it's not to say that the number of times that you would be first or second would change, but there are decks that might choose to go first and are trying to evolve stuff that you can punish by always being a go second deck if your opponent is making a choice. We see that a lot in the Pokemon trading card game, where some decks will be more dominant over the meta, knowing that they're always going to get their choice for going first or second because everyone else is more likely to pick the other option. And then you more likely getting the option you want means that you can build a strategy more specifically to having that option. Raging Bolt is a good example. It pretty much always wants to go second. It started to do really well in a meta where the Charizard deck can't always wanted to go first, so it could evolve the Charmanders into Charizards as soon as possible, which makes sense, right? Pocket removes this level of strategy from it, and I wonder if it's because they're trying to lean in more into RNG. They have a lot of things that say flip a coin, which is not unnatural with Pokemon TCG, but these are cards that are uncommonly chosen. Whereas in Pocket, you kind of have to. You don't have a big enough pool to ignore them, and so it is interesting if it's intentional to remove it for the experience, or if it's just been streamlined and randomized to stop that scenario where you have a player sitting waiting on the screen to press either choice and just moves you straight to the battle and gets you started on setup. So I wonder if that's Marvel Snap talks a lot about how they're we want a game to run for exactly this long with all the actions you take. You have this many turns, this is what happens. And I wonder if this is trying to lean more into that philosophy of keeping the gameplay time to a certain window. Anyway, the next one is another one that I think is mathematically interesting. This is weakness. So in the Pokemon trading card game, you have ×2 weakness to every Pokemon has weakness to one type, which is semi-consistent with the VGC type chart. And then you have the Pocket, which is +20. Now, the way that maths works between multiplication and addition is at when the numbers get bigger for both health and damage, they scale in a ratio because the attack damage will also eventually have to be able to hit the HP. If you have 300 HP and everyone is attacking for 10, the game will drag on too long, and so they need to match. So how many attacks is this thing supposed to take to get knocked out? Weakness often says if you attack something that has a weakness, to your benefit, you should kill it. The great example at the moment is Charizard is Terra Dark type, which is weak to grass, and Ogerpon, which attacks for 3 grass energy and it deals damage equals the number of grass energy attached. Just really doesn't need explaining, but with Charizard, which has the 2 energy required to attack, and the Ogerpon, which has the 3 energy attached, when it attacks, it does almost exactly enough to kill a Charizard. This feels like an incredibly intentional design choice to use the weakness mechanic to create a foil to a very strong card in the format. Now, this will always scale. If you look at some really old Pokemon cards, I think the most damage you would ever see is 70, 80, 90, maybe 100. That it would cost 4 energy, 5 energy, or something ridiculous. And then you look now, we have, for example, Miraidon EX, which does 220 for 3. 220? 220 kills every card from 2010 prior, right? Now, if we ever see something that has 400 HP, and then I only need to do 200 to it with the weakness, it's always going to scale proportionately to the amount of damage done and the amount of HP had. +20 weakness, if power scaling gets out of control, as it potentially tends to do, the older a product gets, right? The more things they need to introduce, they need to innovate, add new things, you need to have reasons to be buying product, they need to feel strong and exciting. That is naturally going to happen over time. As HPs increase, as damage increases, +20 is going to become more and more irrelevant. If something has 220 HP and I'm hitting for 170, weakness guarantees a kill. In Pokemon trading card game, weakness does not guarantee a kill in Pokemon Pocket. And so changing that, I wonder how much of a problem that's going to be. I wonder if weakness should, instead of being on the defender, be on the attacker. So it's like, how much do I exploit my opponent's weakness rather than how much am I hurt by my opponent's strengths? Because it seems weird that way, right? Like having weakness and resistance meant that the type chart worked in both directions, even though resistance was something that isn't super prevalent. It's not on every card, right? Only on some cards for some typings, and has been removed from Pocket, but we'll get back to that in a second. For a type chart that is agnostic to receiving, only to, to dealing in that way, it should maybe be like, well, if I'm ever attacking something of this type, I do this much extra damage, which is what it is basically, but in this case it's determined by the defender. It's like, I'm a grass type Pokemon, whenever I get hit by a fire type Pokemon, I take extra damage. Instead of a fire type Pokemon saying, whenever I attack a grass type Pokemon, I do 20 extra damage. And in the scenario where the attacker is the one that determines the damage bonus, you can have a greater damage bonus that increases over time, which matches the scaling. When you have it on the defender and you go, I got 200 HP as a base, which would be more than anything in the game currently, then you go, okay, but in my weakness, I don't take 20 extra damage. I take 40 extra damage or something like that, right? It feels really bad. It means that you don't truly have 200 HP. It means that you have 160 HP maybe. And it feels like they've removed something, or they've just adjusted something slightly, when instead they should have reworked it to match the system better. And the reason why I think they should rework it is because Pokemon Pocket does not have resistance. In the Pokemon trading card game, resistance is usually like this: Pokemon takes 30 less damage from attacks from a particular type of Pokemon, and it never matches the type that they are weak to. So you're strong against something and you're weak against something. And this makes a lot of sense for the native Pokemon type chart. Everything's that rock, paper, scissors design, except it has like 17 different options to beat rock or not. And resistance, in my experience playing the game, never had a gigantic factor over how much damage was dealt. And even in the modern game, there isn't enough Pokemon with resistance for it to be like hella relevant. So it's not a big deal. So I'm not upset for being removed. But for it being removed for Pocket, it means they're moving away from that classic Pokemon type chart design. That is why I think that weakness needs to be changed to accommodate that, to make more sense to the more casual Pocket player. And so that's why I think that some of this is good and interesting design choices. I just think that they're just stops short. Like there was just such a little bit more that could have been done to really adjust and change some of the problems. Obviously, this is the first release. Some cards are a bit jank. Misty really shouldn't be flipping 3 heads as often as it does. It's a 50-50 and then a 50-50 if you win, and then after that, if you win both times, a 50-50. You really shouldn't be seeing 3 that often. You should be seeing 1 sometimes and 0 sometimes, and then if you're really lucky, 2. And seeing people on Twitter posting big numbers is kind of crazy. So some things obviously aren't perfect, and the way that they work abusing the system that they've put in place also doesn't seem great. But they have made some choices that make the mobile experience feel better and kind of easier to play. And so I'm hoping that they see what it is, see how it's working, and go, okay, do we want to change things for the future to move more towards this target market or demographic or whatever, how they're going to increase it for the future. Because, and the big factor here is that the Pokemon trading card game, unlike Magic the Gathering, is like really agnostic of its past. All the cards that have come and gone, they don't seem to give a shit, and they're always focusing on the new stuff. And we see this because they'll print cards with the same name as the cards that have exist already, but have a different effect, which is really, really weird and crazy, and Magic the Gathering would never. But modernly, they're doing a lot of interesting effects that add into the game that add a lot better experience and quality of life feel when playing the game. Like you can really tell it's a lot less clunky, which I really appreciate, and it works really good. And Pocket's kind of trying to do the same thing, but Pocket has the advantage of that it doesn't have to be agnostic of everything that happened in the past. It can change the thing that's happened in the past. It's not like you printed out the cards and they exist, and then you have to go to that person's house and scribble on it and change it. It's a digital product. You can update the card database for every player. So if something is broken, you can fix it. If something is broken because you release something 5 years from now, you can go back and fix it. Some of the things on this graph, they could go and fix in the future and change things to match better what the environment demands of them. And that's kind of why I like talking about these kind of things, because I'm making games. I've made a TCG of my own that's kind of unreleased at the moment, but you can download it for free and play it from my Discord. Looking at a lot of these kind of things, it's like, why did they make their choices? Was this thing in particular a big problem that needed adjusting? How important was these things? How does my game tackle these same problems? Is the energy system a thing that I need to be worrying about? Should I be thinking about different deck sizes? Do I think that 60 cards is too many? Do I prefer 40 cards? Do I prefer 100 cards? Do I want 2 copies of a card, 4 copies of a card, 1 copy of a card? And then looking at how games are successful in the feel of when you're playing it, in the consistency, in the fun fact, in the excitement of the different mechanics. What do you want to steal? What do you want to improve on? What were you let down by and you want to avoid? It's all really important things to be thinking about when it comes to working on this kind of stuff, working in this kind of industry. So I hope this gave some kind of insight, help you start thinking about what card game design does look like, why big famous designers kind of make the choices that they make. Stuff just kind of comes out and people kind of complain, they go, well, this new thing is broken or whatever. But trying to get an understanding of why. Was it just an oversight? Did something happen? What were they designing a card knowing that you're not supposed to be attacking first and you're not supposed to play a supporter going first, and then that system changed later? These are all things that I kind of think about when it comes to building something, and can I distill the lightning that the Pokemon trading card game has into a product of mine so that I can create something that is fun in the same way. And I hope that is the same kind of thing that you are thinking. If you are curious, I do have a lot of kind of content like this on the channel where I talk about games being made, the games I'm making. I make just a lot of kind of Pokemon content generally, and it's kind of a bunch of board game stuff. So if you are interested in any of that, kind of come and check it out. That's the whole point of the YouTube. I'm supposed to be here telling you to click the like button, the subscribe button, and watch 20 other videos or whatever, and then hand me your wallet in person. It's the system that we live in, unfortunately. But hopefully 30 minutes in, I've given you something in exchange, maybe. Just